So let me tell you how things are supposed to work when you genuinely have God's heart as your main concern, and you're concerned about only doing His will than your own. Now, I need to take you guys on a journey. It's going to take me a minute to get there. Y'all know I do everything around the ocean. I don't do things straight and to the point. Felicia's more straight and to the point. And I like to pick up the details and give you all the adjective and adverbs and the descriptive things to get you or to illustrate to you the point that I'm making. So I like to build a fuller story. So I need for you guys to take you guys on a journey with me for you to fully appreciate this point I need to make to you all in this post. So I need you to be patient with me as I take you on this journey, because we're going somewhere. And when we get to where we need to go, I will bring you back to this main point that I'm making in this post, which is putting God's plan ahead of your own. Because, many of us say that we're doing that, when in actuality, we are not. We're technically are taking our own designs, our own plans, and put it in the front and put it in the forefront and calling it God's master plan. So let me take you on this journey. Now, this journey consists of several years of my history from 2010 to the present day. But again, we're going somewhere. All right, so while I was still out there in the world, wilding out, doing my own thing, I successfully started a small marketing management company. And I called that company at the time Kamby Management Group, Kamby. Kamby Management Group. I went by the name KMG. That's where most people knew my company name by KMG. And to be honest, I had no idea at that time when I started that company, God was behind it and He was setting me up. But I'll come back to that in a minute. At any rate, I grew my business from scratch with no money and one client. At the time, we were covering a small area in the DMV region. But within 3 years, we had successfully expanded KMG into 7 states in the United States and 2 countries outside of the United States: the UK, United Kingdom, and the Dominican Republic. My company had grown within that 3-year span from 1 client to 4. And in the mix of all that, one of my clients decided she wanted to dare me because she saw something in me that I did not see in myself. And so technically, I threw myself into the mix of my clients. So I became my 5th client. So I was pushing my career based on this dare and managing 4 different clients. Then in 2013, I finally decided to walk away from a dead relationship I was involved in at that time. I was just tired of trying to be life into a dead situation. At this point, I had 2 options. I could move back home to Maryland to stay with my daddy for a while until I got on my feet. Around that same time, my baby brother called me. We talked for a while over the telephone, and while we was talking, he made me the offer to come to move to North Carolina to stay with him for a while. Now, I love my brother, There's nothing in the world that I wouldn't do for my little brother. But I had lived with my brother for 18 years. And there was a season shortly for a few months after I had gotten married, my brother came to live with me. So I had no interest in living with my brother. So after we had had the conversation, I heard myself say to him on the phone, because I really already had made up my mind that I was going to go stay with my father for a while. I was going to move back home to Maryland, stay with my father for a while, and then decide where I wanted to live. But I heard myself as I'm talking to my brother, we were finishing up our conversation, I said to him, or I agreed to come live with him. And I was shocked. Because to me, North Carolina was not on my radar. And two, the ideal of living with my brother was to me not in my best interest. And the one thing about me is I am a woman of my word. I strongly believe letting my yes be my yes and my no be my no. So if I say yes to something, or even though I say no, but if I say yes to something, that's what I'm going to do, even if it's a disadvantage to me. Now, I don't know why I'm wired like that, and I know that's a Bible principle, but it's a principle that I live and die by. That's just how I am. That's how I'm wired. At any rate, again, I had no idea that God was playing interference in my life, and that's how I ended up looking back, that's how I ended up in North Carolina. Because when my brother and I had talked about, and he kept pushing the idea of me coming to live with him. And when we were talking on the phone, it was a few days, maybe about 2, maybe 3 weeks, but it was a couple of days before I was about to relocate to Maryland. And I was just slowly getting my stuff together. And trying to decide exactly what date I wanted to relocate to Maryland. And at any rate, and it was like a spontaneous decision I made over the phone while I was talking with my brother. So I'm living in North Carolina now with my brother, temporarily with my brother. I got a fairly decent job, got plenty of money in the bank. And I just need to make a decision about my living arrangements. Where in North Carolina, since I'm here and got a decent job, do I want to live? And at the time, I wasn't really doing anything with Cami Management Group. I had parked the company for a while. I allowed the contracts of 3 of my clients to expire. I was holding on to that one client, Ace Rain. She was probably, I had some very talented clients that I worked for, but she probably was my favorite. So I was holding on her, but I had gone ghost on her for a few months. So I was avoiding having conversation with her. And at the time, but anyway, at the time too, I hadn't told anyone about the success I was having with my company or my music career. I hadn't told any of my siblings, and I didn't tell my parents. No one really knew the true success I was having with my company and my own career, music career, but myself. Not even my clients was really fully aware. So around about 2013, Felicia and I met, and we would hang out and call each other over the phone as we was developing our friendship. And we discovered we had a lot in common, and where we had differences, where there was no commonality between her and I. We respectfully respect each other's individualism. At some point, Felicia moved from Virginia. That's where she was living at the time when we met. And she moved here to Matthews, North Carolina. And so when she moved here, we started hanging out more together and became the best of friends. We were almost inseparable, to be honest with you. And then in the middle of 2013, and to this day, I really do not know how Felicia found out about this music career I was involved in, that I really wasn't doing much even with my career at this particular time. I was still making money off of my royalties, but I wasn't really pushing it, and I wasn't making new music. But somehow she became aware of the success, well, maybe not necessarily success, that I was dibbling in music. And so she started to inquire, and I was trying hard to avoid having this conversation with Felicia. And I don't even think Felicia can recall how she found out about my music career. Or maybe it was God. But at any rate, 3 things happened shortly after Felicia found out that I had this thing going on the side. Felicia's mother died. I don't remember which year her mother died. I didn't really know her mother personally, but Felicia started going back and forth to Tennessee quite often during this time frame when her mother fell ill. And then her mother chose to not have emergency surgery that she was supposed to have. And it was sometime after that she finally died. Felicia, fortunately, was able to get there just in time enough for that, right before her mother passed. And that had a great effect on Felicia. And of course, if it had effect on her and she's hurting, then it's directly impacting me as well. So that was the first significant thing that happened. Then the second thing was Felicia still kept asking me about this music career of mine. She was just being so inquisitive, and I was very hesitant to have any conversation about it because I had kept it a secret for so long, and I didn't know her true motivation. Why was she being so inquisitive? So I was hesitant because I didn't know why she was asking it. She wouldn't give an explanation why. She would just start asking a bunch of questions. But then I realized that she was going to keep asking the questions until I addressed it. So I finally decided, you know what? I'm just going to answer every question that she has, and maybe then she will stop. And I guess my hesitant of why I was hesitant of having a conversation with Felicia is, one, I didn't really know what her true motive or pure motives of asking, and 2, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my music career. I didn't. I was still trying to figure out my business, what I want to do with it, and I still was trying to figure out, do I want to pursue this music thing, and to what degree? I didn't know what to do. So those 2 things probably was playing more of a role of why I was avoiding to have the conversation with her. And on top of that, I was still feeling some pressure from my business because at the time I still was getting inquiries from overseas from individuals who wanted me to pick them up as a client. So my business was calling my name, so to speak, to do something with it. But I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So those were probably my reasons I was hesitating, because I really just didn't want to make a decision one way or the other. Again, that goes back to my principle, letting my yes be yes and my no be no. If I'm not going to do it, then I need to put a halt to everything and then just cease everything I'm doing. But if I am going to do it, then, I need to put my full effort in it. And I just was in a neutral zone, not really giving thought to whether I want to do it or not doing it. But I guess I was hesitant of just cutting it all off because I can sense there was something there, but I wasn't sure what it was. And it probably, again, was God playing interference in my life. But anyway, at some point, when it came with the one client I was holding on to, I got to a point where I really didn't care. I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. Maintaining that business working relationship. I know there was a lot of people that was interested in getting my client into their organization, and I didn't want to be the cause of holding Ace back if she wanted to move on to other things and to continue her career. So I knew I needed to make a decision concerning Ace, and her contract was coming up to where it was about to expire. And so when her contract time came to expire, it just, everything in me just felt, and again, I feel that this probably was God. It was time to end that working relationship. So I didn't renew her contract, which gave her the freedom to move on. And so the only decision now I have to make is concerning my business. What do I want to do? One, with my business, and two, with this music career of mine that is still growing, and I'm not even pushing it at this particular point. The third thing, the significant thing that happened was, this is when God stepped up his game and he started dealing directly with Felicia in my heart. He was ready for the both of us to get our acts together and to step fully into our purpose, what he had called us to do in this life that we were really wasting away. And I guess the best way to put it is something I used to hear Felicia say a lot when she would speak of her own personal testimony and a conversation that she had with God when God approached her and tell her, this is not exactly what God said to her, but just stop. Stop. And Felicia just finally said to him, you know what? I can't outrun you. And a matter of fact, I'm tired of running. And so God started dealing with Felicia's heart, and he started dealing with my heart. Now, the difference between our rededication is Felicia probably recognized God quicker than I did. And this was around about late 2013 when he came knocking at my door. I'm not quite sure the time frame when he came knocking at Felicia's door. It probably was the same year, but just earlier that year. And like I say, Felicia recognized him because she was very familiar with his voice. I didn't recognize him when he came knocking. In fact, I thought I was having psychotic episodes. I thought I was losing it. So it wasn't until the early 2014 that I started slowly responding to God and starting to recognize who he is and what he wanted and needed from me. And so I started to build really a relationship with God for the first time at around that time frame. I had a relationship with religion and was very faithful at doing that for many years before my slide from grace. But I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't know who God was, what he was about, and that I could really have a relationship with him. So around about early 2014, I was starting to learn who my Father really is. And this relationship, establishing a relationship I can have with Him. But at any rate, so fast forward to time, and God is dealing with both Felicia and I, and at the same time, we're helping each other to walk through this messy process of ours. And I'll be honest with you, I know I couldn't have got through that season if it wasn't for Felicia's support. And God knew what He was doing. We were isolated from the church during that time frame. But at some point, He did directed us to the church. And when we did get into church, our growth started speeding up real fast. Things got to moving at an accelerated pace. It was more easy and smooth for Felicia. I would say if I had to count an actual time frame of how long it took Felicia through the process that God was taking her through, she probably was in that process 1.5 years. Excuse me, throat getting a little dry. But me, I was going through my process, or I went through my process for a good 7 years, maybe 7.5. And to be honest with you, now that I look back and I say this to y'all, 7.5 years was the time frame that I had fallen from grace. I was out there wilding out for 7.5 years. So yeah, my process, wow, that is amazing. My process of getting myself together and establishing a real relationship, a healthy relationship with the Father, was 7.5 years. The same at the time I was out there running the streets. Now, ain't that interesting? When I said, let me tell you how things are supposed to work when you genuinely have God's heart or His desire as your main concern, and you are more concerned about doing the will of the Father and not your own. Now, what do all I had said have got anything to do with that? Everything. So let me wrap this up by getting to the point. When Felicia approached me again about my music career, initially I tried to avoid the conversation. Like I said, until I realized that she wasn't going to stop until I answered all her questions. So I reluctantly listened, answered every one of her questions. But then she said something to me that triggered me. And she said, I've always wanted to have, and I'm not going to go into details of what she said that she always wanted to have. And that's a trigger for me because I have a soft spot for those who have unfulfilled dreams, ambitions, goals. For some reason, I get a high off of helping people to walk fully into their purpose when they really can see themselves doing something, but they either just need support or don't know how to get themselves moving in the right direction. I just love doing that. I love seeing people getting elevated. And I don't know why I like that. I'm like Felix in the movie Wrecking It Ralph. You know, Felix was the character. Every time Ralph went around to different places and he ended up tearing up things, without anybody asking, Felix would go fix it. So he was like Mr. Fix It in the movie. And that's my personality. I am wired like that. If I see someone who wants to really genuinely do something that's in them, it's a part of them, and they just are not getting it going, I'm the first in line. I'm Mrs. Fix It. If you're serious about this, I can get it done. That's my motto, is the best way to put it. When Felicia made that statement to me, I've always wanted to have, right then and there, we decided to enter into a business partnership. And we might have operated in that business partnership for a few months, maybe a year, until God spoke to me. And this might have been mid-2015. And when God spoke to me, He told me to do 4 things. The first 2 was fairly easy. It was no biggie for me. But the last 2, especially the last one, I struggled with a little bit. It threw me off that I had to wait. I decided to wait a few days before I did anything, just to make sure. And if you know my personality, when you put something before me, I'm off to the races. It's as good as done. But those last 2 things kind of tripped me up a little bit, and I wanted to make sure I was hearing right. So I waited a few days before I did anything one way or the other. The first thing God said to me, demote myself from the CEO role and take on no official title. I know, that was the first thing He opened with. I was a little confused by it, but I just listened. I was like, okay, where's this going? 2, then He told me to give Felicia ownership rights to half of my business and everything I had built with no strings attached. Now again, that was a little weird to me, because typically when you bring in a business partnership, everyone pretty much knows it is a wise business move. When you bring in others, you make sure you own the largest share of your company. That's just business 101. But here God is telling me, no, do not make this 51% you own and 49% she owns. Make it 50-50. Then we get to point number 3. Then God tells me, promote Felicia as CEO and change the company's name from KMG, Cami Management Group, LLC, to Newford Ministries. Okay, if I'm appointing Felicia as CEO, you're telling me not to take an official title, then where does that leave me? And I can see the name change from Cami Management Group. So I'm like, okay, if I'm appointing her CEO and I'm changing my company name and I'm not taking on an official job title, okay, where does that leave me? But I just listen. And so then God gets to the 4th and final point. But then He tells me, I am not only to submit and surrender my business to Felicia, but I am to submit myself to her authority. Now, mind you, I'm older than Felicia. I'm probably a year and a half or a year and a few months older than Felicia. But I am to submit myself to her authority. And then God tells me I am to train her how to become a first-class CEO and savvy businesswoman. When I first heard that, that was a hard pill to swallow. I was shocked. I was taken aback by what God was asking me to do. You want me to step down, take on no job title. And by the way, he didn't give me a official job title for at least the next 2, maybe 3 years before he just one day showed up in my office and says, okay, you are now taking on the title of executive director. But that's how God works. At any rate, you want me to step down from as CEO of the company that I built, where my resume clearly shows that I am more qualified for the CEO position than Felicia's resume. And we both have very, very decent looking resumes. Then I am to not only to step down with no official title and no clue what I will be doing now in Newford, our new company name. And you want me to hand over and surrender my company, and I kept emphasizing that I built, over to Felicia, then submit to her authority in whatever decisions you have her to make for this company, and then turn around and train her to become a first-class CEO. So, as I said, I took a few days to think about that. Let me rephrase that. I took it for a few days and waited, because I not necessarily think about what I do with, to make sure I was hearing God and from God. To me, I wanted to make sure before I did one way or another, before I committed to a yes or no, I wanted to know this was God I was hearing from. So this is what I meant when I said earlier, let me tell you how things are supposed to work when you genuinely have God's heart and you're more concerned about His will. By me stepping down from the CEO role that I knew I was more qualified for into an unknown position, and then turning around to train Felicia, who is less qualified to operate in the CEO role, that is the action by someone who is more concerned about the will of God and His desires than their own. I gave up everything. Everything, guys. I had built, at least I thought I had built, with my own hands in order to do things God's way. Hence, our mission statement for our business, doing business God's way. So I want to end this video by asking you guys a prompting question. What about you? Today, are you really doing things God's way? What have you really given up or sacrificed to do all things God's way? Or are you doing some things God's way? Or are you doing everything God's way? That's the question of the day. Are you doing some things God's way? Or are you doing everything God's way? My life, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or drag this out, my life symbolizes what it really means to do everything God's way, where God's heart, His desire, doing His will is more of a concern for you than doing your own. When you have reached that point, you will do everything His way, even when it's at a disadvantage to you, even when you have to give up more or sacrifice more to accomplish His will. So that's our question, my question for you guys today. Are you doing everything God's way? Or are you doing some things God's way and calling it God's master plan?